I'm moving again. I've moved many times in my life, from America to Japan and back to America and back to Japan, and now I'm moving from Seattle to the Midwest. And every time I move, I end up, of course, buying boxes. You can see all my Home Depot boxes back here. And these boxes are full of all of the music books that used to live on those shelves. And every time I move, I end up with a stack of books that are what I would call unboxable. They're books that I end up taking with me in my backpack because I practice them up into the day of the move, and then even through the course of the transition, they're just books that I'd never want to put away. And it occurred to me that it might be an interesting topic for video to show what these books are from for me now at this time in my life, because it shows a little bit what I value in music, and it might be an interesting conversation to have here on YouTube. Which books do you consider to be the essential ones? So I'm just going to show you these books, and this is in no particular order. The first one is this, Frank Koonce's edition of the Bach Lute Suites. Probably one of the most important books a guitarist could own. And what I like about this is that it has good fingerings, and it has the manuscripts in the back. So this is a classic. Okay, now this is an old edition of Carcassi's 25 Etudes, Opus 60, but what's really important to me about this book is that it's the edition that Miguel Llobet made. And so it gives you a perspective on how Llobet would finger this 19th century Italian music. And this particular book has a real special meaning to me because it's one of the first books where I've started to really get into classical guitar. And so you can see it's well worn. I don't even think this is in print anymore, but this is killer. Any edition of the Carcassi is good, but the Llobet one, I think, is my favorite. This is a book of Brouwer's music, and I've spent a lot of time on these 20 etudes in here, and not a lot of time on the other pieces in here. There's like Tarantos and Parabola, some of the more like slightly aleatoric works that he wrote in the 70s and 80s. But this one is always on my music stand because I go back to the Brouwer etudes a lot. I feel like it's a really unfussy way to build guitar technique. Okay. This one, I haven't practiced this in a while, but I don't box it because I always want to be able to return to this. This book is basically lines in all positions of the guitar, and it's sort of like a low-key theoretical text. He doesn't really tell you what he's doing, but there's a lot to unpack in here. And if you're a jazz player, this is one of those must-have books. Another cool thing about this book is that it's totally accessible to anyone. You don't have to read music at all. And you can get into really advanced jazz lines because of the format of the book. It's got these kind of diagrams, and you just play the notes in the order of the numbers. And then you end up with the lines that are notated here. Eventually I'll do a video on this book, breaking down some of my thoughts on it, but this is one that's unboxable for me. Okay, this, my teacher's book. I studied with Ricardo for 3 years in graduate school and was his teaching assistant. And in addition to a lot of repertoire and a lot of chamber music at the University of Denver with Jonathan Leithwood and Masa Ito. In addition to all of that, every student of Ricardo went deep with this book, particularly the graduate students. And I still practice this regularly. It's one of the best technique books because it breaks things down into categories. And it's not so much a method, but sort of more of like a physical training kind of philosophy that maybe it's more of an athletic training kind of approach to guitar technique. But I also find that it's really valuable for developing textural things in improvisation. So there are double notes and a lot of scales and different double trills and things that can be useful to an improviser as well. You'll see I wrote this thing on the front because I cycle through a lot of these books. Something I didn't mention, you probably noticed that all of these have a bookmark. But what I'll do is keep returning to these books and cycle through them, practice them over and over and over for years and years. And I just keep returning to where the bookmark is, and I move it along. And so I practice this entire book from cover to cover now, and I go through, level 1, then I do level 2. I try to do like 2 levels a day, and I just keep cycling it. And I do that with all of these books, actually. This book, actually, I didn't box this, although I don't spend a lot of time necessarily with this Carcassi book, but I like to have some materials around that are sort of lower level classical pieces for sight reading. So some of you may know that I've taught language acquisition at various colleges in Japan and in the States, and I tend to think about, teaching language from the perspective of music or teaching music from the perspective of language acquisition. And one of the concepts is extensive reading, and also this idea of the zone of proximal development, which you can check out articles on Wiki about. But suffice to say that I think it's really important to be reading a lot of music that's below your playing level. So music that's really easy for you. You can basically play it, in a satisfactory way at first sight. And these Carcassi pieces published, this is like an old Schott edition I came across somehow. It's beautifully published. But anyway, they're fun pieces, and it's just a lot of short, easy pieces by Carcassi, opus 33, 40, 48, 49, 62, 73. So this book I don't have a lot of history with, but that's why it's not in the box, because I like to have some stuff like that. Okay, here's another one. This is I'm afraid to say a PDF printout here. The Bill Evans fake book. Just a good way to dive into jazz harmony and to understand jazz harmony. I think one of the things that's really overlooked is the melodies. And what I've learned from Bill Evans is that if you look at a tune like Time Remembered, for example, the melody itself teaches you a lot about his harmonic thinking over changes. And so I'll play through those a lot. I also have a stack here of jazz standards that I've practiced over the last year or so. And these are just various things, like Miles Davis tunes, Dave Brubeck. I like to have these on the stand. A lot of Thelonious Monk songs from the Thelonious Monk fake book. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to save the most important thing for last, I think. Okay, this is not the last one, though. The Aguado method. This is translation by Brian Jeffrey, and I think it's quite good. It's beautifully published. And I would say that of all of the guitar methods, including the method by Sor, this one is maybe the most surprising in a sense. It feels like it could have been written recently. There's so many things that are so, quote unquote modern. Maybe we underestimate these 19th century geniuses a little bit. But there's also, in the back of this book, there are all of these studies that are quite challenging, but teach you a lot about writing for solo guitar. And I feel like the BROUWER studies, the Aguado studies are ones that kind of strengthen the technique most quickly. I feel like the like the payout is pretty good for what you put in. Whereas I feel like with some sets of etudes, I don't get that sense that my hands are really being improved so much. They might be musically interesting, but I don't get that benefit so quickly. And with Aguado, I definitely feel I'm getting that. And I can't mention Aguado without mentioning Sor. This particular edition of the Fernando Sor studies, this printing is my favorite. And this has been republished with a new engraving that I don't like as much by the same publisher. I think this is out of print now, but if you can find this, it is great. I mean, first of all, the engraving is good, the fingerings are good, and it has all of the Fernando Sor studies, which I think are maybe in the final analysis, maybe the most important studies written for the guitar. And you know, I did that series Sor Mind, and I'll hopefully continue that on this channel. And I'm usually playing from this edition. This is, some of you in manufacturing might recognize that stuff on the front there. That's the sort, set in order, shine, standardize, sustain. This is one of the things my dad was talking about. He was in manufacturing, and I was thinking about these manufacturing principles in relation to, you know, music practice at one point, and I wrote them on here. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to say about Fernando Sor except that it's some of the best, most elegant music ever written for the instrument. And there are a lot of different keys and tonalities represented here. This is a really important book. But I wouldn't maybe consider it my most important or my favorite book that I own. I will get to that in just a moment. There's one more thing. This is not a guitar book, but this is a little treatise written by Handel for, I think, Queen Anne, I believe, or Princess Anne, I forget. Maybe English people are laughing at me right now, but these are figured bass exercises, and this has some amazing, really simple but profound advice on four-part harmonization. I'll share one idea with you. If you have four-part triads moving in parallel motion, if you want to have satisfactory voice leading, you can simply make the bass voice go in the opposite direction of the triad. Some simple things like that are just really powerful, and I've been practicing this on the keyboard and then translating it to the guitar a bit to learn more about, you know, the rule of the octave and some of these different embellishments that are used in figured bass realizations. So that's on the stand and not going in the box. Okay, last but certainly not least, the last unboxable book is actually, I have 2 copies of it. This is very much my favorite set of music, I think. My favorite music book, period. I have 2 editions. This one is my old one, and I wrote Play a Prayer at one point because I felt like it was, I don't know, I was in a spiritual zone with Bach, I guess, when I wrote that. But you can see here that this, I'll give you an example of a page here, what this one looks like. Here you go, look at that. So I recorded this piece a while back, and you can see that everything's fingered. So it's kind of falling apart. The binding is broken because I've had this for so long. So I replaced it recently. And this edition is, I think, a little more like computer engraving, which is unfortunate because the old hand engraving, I think, was far better to look at. But my plan is not to write in this book because I think the most important thing you can do as a musician, here's a bold statement for you, on the guitar, is to read this book, the entire book, and to not learn Bach, but to Bach as a verb. And what do I mean by that? Well, maybe that's a subject for another video, but we, as guitarists, we often will find a fingering, repeat it over and over and over, get it into muscle memory, and then we feel, oh, we've learned Bach, so I know that piece now. But what I'm proposing and what I'm working on in my own musicianship is something much different, which is to play this music with different fingerings, in a different position, in a different way, every single time I play each measure. And the idea is that by doing that, you're engaging with Bach in more of an improvised type way, and you're also, as you're reading it, you're analyzing the harmony constantly. So you're always asking yourself, what am I playing right now? And then you're finding a different pathway on the instrument. So to Bach as a verb is to turn on that process and let it roll, where you're solving things real time and you're finding all these different pathways through the labyrinth of harmony and counterpoint. And so that's why there are no fingerings here in this text, no violin fingerings either, which can be confusing. And of course, everyone knows that this is some of the best music ever written for any instrument. It happens to lie very nicely on the guitar, particularly the fugues. Some of the fugues feel like almost written for the instrument, like this one just popped up when I'm flipping through. This kind of a fugue just sits so beautifully on the guitar. I imagine if Bach had written guitar music, it might be something like this, or like the lute music I showed you earlier. But those are all the books I have right now that are not packed and will not be packed. And this is something that would maybe change the next move I make. If I move again, I might have a different set of books, but I thought it'd be interesting to share it with you. And I'm curious what you consider to be the essential books in your musical life. Post them in the comments. Let me know. Thanks for checking this out. See ya.